This month's interview is with Mike Mentzer, yet again. We've interviewed him twice already, and we're starting to think we should rename these tapes the Mike Mentzer audio tape series. The thing is, of all the experts we've interviewed, we've gotten the best response from our tapes with Mike. People love hearing about his high-intensity workout, and let's face it, training information that we can start using immediately without buying any special equipment or supplements is pretty rare these days. How are you, Mike?
See, if I were doing any better, it would be literally obscene.
How is that?
Well, this Mike Mentzer, Dorian Yates heavy-duty thing has proliferated in popularity until now. It's a groundswell that is literally phenomenal. In fact, only this morning, and it's only 9:30 Los Angeles time, I received 6 phone calls from individuals across the country who heard those two first audio tapes, tape number 1 and number 2 I did with Bill. People are still responding to those tapes with enormous enthusiasm, and I certainly do appreciate it.
Terrific. I'm glad we could help. Now listen, there's a chance that some of our listeners are new to the sport of bodybuilding, so could you please synopsize your view of training for them? Tall order, I know.
All right, that's a tall order. Let me approach it maybe what will seem a little bit obliquely.
Okay.
The vast majority of bodybuilders, TC, seem to have the idea that the purpose is to go into the gym like a macho dummy and see how many sets they can do or how long they can endure. A bodybuilding workout is not an endurance contest. There are other individuals who seem to have the idea that the purpose is to go into the gym and do merely less than what everybody else is doing. Since nobody else has the slightest clue as to what they're doing, to react blindly and uncritically to that and do merely less is arbitrary also. As I made the point on the last tape, there is no room in science for the arbitrary. The idea should be to go into the gym and intelligently perform precisely what nature requires in the way of imposing a training stress and in the right amounts. One of my favorite analogies here lately goes to medicine, in fact, anesthesiology. TC, if you were going to go into surgery tomorrow, you would very much want the anesthesiologist to infuse or inject your circulatory system with the key term here is precise amount of chemical compound required to induce a state of anesthesia. If you were being wheeled into the surgical suite on a stretcher and you overheard the anesthesiologist say something to the effect, pump them up just like in bodybuilding. Pump them up. Give them more. More anesthesia is better than less. You would jump off the stretcher and run out the door.
Damn right.
You wouldn't feel very good about that. Or if you heard him say something slightly different like, let's infuse TC's circulatory system with a little bit less anesthesia than we gave that guy yesterday. We killed the poor bastard. Let's give TC a little bit less and see what happens. Now, here's the point. In this particular case where life and death is clearly an issue, it's very easy to see, of course, why scientific precision, again, dear listener, the key term is precision, why scientific precision is so very important. My point is that bodybuilders should take that principle from medical theory and apply it to bodybuilding theory. Again, the idea is not to go into the gym with the idea more is better or less is better. The idea is to go into the gym like an intelligent, rational, logical human being and perform the precise amount of exercise required. Any more than that is overtraining. Going back for a second to this parallel with medical theory, it's interesting. The first thing the medical researchers had to do, of course, was discover or identify the precise chemical compound that would serve to induce a state of anesthesia. Once they discovered that chemical compound, of course, they then had to find out precisely how much was needed. Going back to bodybuilding theory, where of course, we're still working with human physiology. In this case, we didn't have to discover a chemical compound to induce anesthesia. We had to discover the training stress that would serve to induce, similar use of terms, induce a state of muscular hypertrophy. Once the training stress was discovered, we then had to find out precisely Precisely. I can't emphasize the term enough. We had to discover precisely how much was required. And as it turns out, TC and dear listener, the amount of high-intensity training stress required to induce a strength and muscular size increase ain't nearly as much as many people have been led to believe or would like to believe. In fact, so many people are obsessing with the issue of volume, number of sets, literally obsessing, that they're failing to sit down, take the time, and consider the nature of one actual set of high-intensity training to failure. One set of barbell squats to failure, for instance, might be viewed as something akin to exposing your skin to 3 hours of intense sunlight. Stop obsessing with the idea of number one. There's nothing wrong with it. In fact, the issue of volume, as Arthur Jones pointed out brilliantly years ago, the issue of volume, or number of sets, listener, is a negative. Let me state that again. This is perhaps one of the most important issues, TC, I can get across today. The issue of volume, once again, or number of sets, is a negative with a capital N. Whether you do one set, listener, or 100 sets. Insofar that you train at all, even one set is a negative. Insofar that you train at all, you're making an inroad into the body's recovery ability. And to the extent that you do that, you have that much less of your body's resources left over for overcompensation, which is growth. In other words, the more you train, the more of your body's energies and resources are used in the attempt to merely compensate for the exhaustive effects of the exercise, which is what recovery is. And less of that recovery ability is left over for overcompensation. So to underscore this, to summarize it again, the idea is to have the individual go into the gym and perform the precise amount of exercise required.
All right. Let me see if I can throw a curveball at you, and let's see if you can hit it out of the ballpark, okay?
I have no doubt about that one.
Okay, fair enough. Let's use medicine as an analogy again. There's Western medicine and there's Eastern medicine. They use a whole different approach.
There is reason and there is mysticism.
But there is
logic and there is irrationality.
Okay, what about physics? There are different theories of physics. We're searching for a unified theory. There's quantum physics, there's Einsteinian physics.
Now, you have to be careful here.
Okay.
I just wrote a lengthy paper on this entitled Mind Training. It's going to be published in Flex, and in fact, I talked about physics, believe it or not. You've got to be very careful.
Okay.
We still live in a semi-free country, TC, where people can print just about anything they damn well please, including physicists. And like other people, there are good physicists and bad physicists. I have heard all the garbage you're talking about.
Okay.
And it flows from the philosophy of irrationalism or mysticism. There is and can be only one valid theory of anything. First of all, you have to understand the term theory. A theory is a set of principles which purports to be either a correct description of some aspect of reality, like physics or bodybuilding, and or a guideline for successful human action. In other words, reality is the realm of the truth. There is only one reality, therefore there can only possibly be one correct description of any aspect of it. Yes, there are diverse opinions. There are those who are offering poorly considered opinions. There are other physicists offering carefully considered opinions. And there are a few, the ones you don't read about because they're not seeking public popularity publishing this garbage. There is and can be only one valid theory of physics.
Well, who is to say which of those theories is correct?
Anyone who is willing to take the time and exercise the required mental effort to learn the laws of logic and make a judgment for himself. Actually, no one individual is the final authority in intellectual matters or ethics or anything else. Reality is the ultimate arbiter. It is up to each individual, anyone who has concern with ideas in the realm of the intellect, to make a judgment for himself. What you're suggesting is that, well, actually in this particular case, you're becoming a little bit contentious. Well, who in the hell is Mike Mentzer to say these physicists are wrong? After all, he's only a bodybuilding trainer. If you recall from the last tape, I reported that we are living not merely in a dark age, but a black hole. One would not think that science would be involved in that, but in fact there is increasing evidence that science itself, including physics, is in the throes of a rapid process of intellectual disintegration. The idea here is you've got to be very careful and not accept uncritically everything that's offered in print. When someone says that there are many theories and no one can be right, he's committing a logical fallacy known as the fallacy of self-exclusion. His own statement is a theory. The statement that there are no valid theories or only one valid theory is a theory in itself. It's a self-contradiction. Do you see that?
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it sure does. All right. But let me finish. I was just saying that if I ask you a question, it doesn't necessarily mean that I believe that way. I'm a reporter, an interviewer. I'm not allowed to have opinions. So I'm asking you things just so that you may, so we can just stir some conversation, okay? Fair enough?
So be it.
Okay, all right, good enough. You sent us a letter recently that said that there's evidence coming out of Texas that overtraining can actually be harmful to your health.
Well, in fact, I was going to bring that up myself. I have that letter to Bill Phillips sitting right here in front of me. If you'll indulge me, I'll read that letter.
Okay.
Listener, this is a letter I wrote to Bill Phillips on January the 11th. Indulge me here for about a minute or two. You'll find this letter most interesting.
Sure.
Dear Bill, a quick note to let you know that things are going very well. My articles apparently are extremely popular, as evidenced by the number of letters and phone calls I get. The majority are from agonizingly confused bodybuilders smart enough to understand my factually based, logical, non-contradictory philosophy. Many were even on the verge of giving up training entirely, frustrated after months and years of no progress. Most gratifying recently has been the increasing number of very well-educated individuals, including physicists, in fact, there, TC.
Okay.
Chemical engineers, cardiac and neurosurgeons, et al., who find my articles very appealing. Many of them have called as a result of your still sending out those audio tapes we did. Thank you. I was quite excited the other day when during a news program they presented a piece on the recent research of the aerobic guru in Texas, Dr. Kenneth Cooper. After 2 years of doing just about everything I could within reason to alert bodybuilders and fitness enthusiasts about the dangers of overtraining, here comes along the famous Dr. Cooper stating some of the same things I have on the subject. As I have written and stated frequently, Cooper made it clear that overtraining is more than wasted effort. It is counterproductive. In fact, it is life-threatening. About 8 issues ago in Flex, I wrote in my column, and I quote myself here, "While I don't have the hard evidence, it stands to reason that chronic, gross overtraining may very well have long-range medical implications," close quote. Now here comes the well-respected Dr. Cooper stating that he has the evidence. He and his research colleagues have grown alarmed by the increasing incidence of serious diseases, including cancer and heart problems, among long-term bodybuilding and fitness enthusiasts. And they ascribe it most directly to overtraining. I have no doubt, as I stated on our previous tapes, that overtraining is the single most serious problem in the field of athletic training, and no one else seems to notice or care. I had Sports Illustrated interested in an article on the subject. That article, along with what we're saying in the muscle magazines, and what massive attention Cooper is already getting on the subject, perhaps the issue will finally get the kind of attention it deserves. End of that.
Terrific. That's compelling stuff.
I've been doing everything, in fact, that I possibly could over the last 2 years at least to alert bodybuilders of the destructive influence of overtraining. No one else in the bodybuilding world picked up the gauntlet. Now here finally there's a Dr. Kenneth Cooper who some of the older listeners may remember from 20 years ago, the man who in fact popularized aerobic training in this country. He is saying, listener, that overtraining is not merely counterproductive in that it hampers your training progress. It is literally life-threatening. In his book, which I have here in front of me, he cites a number of case studies involving individuals among his many clients down there at his institute in Texas who started coming down with heart disease and cancer. So many, in fact, TC, that after a while he got alarmed. He was quite stymied by this initially. He couldn't figure it out. These were purists, if you will, individuals who didn't drink, smoke, eat fats. They were running several days a week, even lifting weights, and all of a sudden they were getting heart attacks and cancer. He and his alarmed colleagues undertook a research program that finally yielded the answer: overtraining. And it's not hard to understand if you look at training as a form of physical stress, just like sunlight is. Sunlight is a form of physical stress on the body, just like exercise. Up to a very definite point in time, exposing your skin to high-intensity sunlight stress will yield you a positive course known as a suntan. Any slightest bit beyond that will result in a negative, a sunburn. Exercise is a form of intense physical stress on the body. Exposing your body to a high-intensity training stress up to a very definite point in time will yield you a positive too. Not a suntan buildup in this case, but a buildup of muscular mass as a defensive barrier against future assaults by that same physical stress. Now, most people regard getting a suntan or developing large muscles as purely cosmetic. However, nature did not have that in mind, of course. The buildup of a suntan or muscle mass beyond normal levels serve as protective barriers against intense physical stresses. But those barriers can be overwhelmed. The body does not have an infinite capacity for tolerating the destructive effects of intense physical stress. So again, if you look at exercise like a physical stress, what happens when you overexpose your skin to intense sunlight? You burn. One of my old friends who understands high-intensity training theory very well refers to overtraining as an exercise sunburn. The point here is you don't know what damage you're doing to your glandular system when you're chronically, grossly overtraining. You've got to be very, very careful. Again, not just in terms of how it will adversely affect your ongoing training progress, but your long-term health. It's a very serious issue, and I'm glad you brought that up, TC. It's again, not something that I have a weird emotional investment in, but I have come to identify overtraining as the single most crucially important issue in all of athletics. 99.9% of all athletes, including bodybuilders, and especially bodybuilders grossly overtrained, they all operate with the childlike, simplistic notion that if more jelly beans are better than less, well then, by golly, it's obvious, more training must be better than less. But if you go back to childhood, in fact, you'll see that your conclusion was erroneous. More jelly beans ain't better than less. After a certain point, you get sick.
Okay.
The science of bodybuilding exercise is not infinitely complex, but my goodness, people, it's not so very simple where you can take a principle, more is better, from childhood and apply it to a very complex subject and expect meaningful results. There's more to the science of exercise than the principle more is better. And as I stated earlier, more is not better. Less is not better. In fact, as Jones pointed out once again, the issue of volume, number of sets, is a decided negative. Even one set is a negative. Insofar that you train at all, you're making an inroad into recovery ability. But of course, you have to do at least one set to stimulate growth. Anything beyond that will lead to overtraining.
All right, let's get a little specific again for some of the readers, some of the listeners who aren't familiar with you or are new to us. Take me, for example, give me a leg workout, for instance, that represents your principles.
A leg workout?
Yeah, just for example, just so people would understand better what we're talking about.
my average in the gym client, as well as my 50 or 60 phone consultation clients, are all doing essentially the same leg workout. They start out with a set of leg extensions to failure, 6 to 10 reps, and then immediately with no rest proceed to either a leg press or squat in superset fashion, 6 to 10 reps to failure. Once they have completed the superset, they can take a brief rest. I tell them to go get a drink of water, walk around the gym, stare at some of those girls clad in thongs and bikinis to get your testosterone levels up. Then they come back and do a set of leg curls, take another brief rest, then do one set of calf raises. Now, here more recently, I'm employing a different principle which is going to get your readers very excited. I was hesitating on whether or not I should dispense this information on this audio tape because this information is literally of stunning value. You can't even put a price tag on it for those who are really interested in bodybuilding. What I have come to discover, TC, Bill Phillips, John Balick, Joe Weider, dear listener, and everybody who cares about optimal progress, is that we've all been wasting our time lifting weights.
Come again? What do you mean?
In this country, it's a tradition, of course, to call this thing weightlifting. But remember, I said a little bit earlier, there's no room in science for the arbitrary or the traditional. We used to have this thing called weightlifting contests. When young guys would want to train, they would say, hey, let's go to the YMCA and lift weights. I have come to discover that lifting weights is a waste of time. In fact, dear listener, you would do much better to start holding the weights in the contracted position, only doing the lowering of the weight. Let me give you the rationale, TC.
Okay.
As Arthur Jones pointed out, again, Arthur Jones, the positive portion of any exercise, the lifting of the weight, is the least productive in terms of stimulating an increase. Why? Because it's the weakest part of the movement. You cannot lift nearly as much weight as you can hold, and you can't hold as much weight as you can lower. On top of that, the positive, or the lifting of the weight, is a negative in that it is the one portion of the exercise that makes the deepest inroad into recovery ability. And as I've already stated twice, that is a negative. What I've been having my clients doing is holding the weights in the fully contracted position for up to 15 seconds, and then once they recognize their static strength is about to go, they start lowering the weight very slowly. And the results I'm achieving are literally phenomenal. The purpose of a bodybuilder is not to lift merely heavy weights. That's a power lifter's purpose.
Okay.
Let me reemphasize that. As a bodybuilder, dear listener, your primary goal is not to lift heavy weights, but to achieve high intensity or maximum contractions of the muscle. Obviously, the only place that you can achieve a maximum contraction would be in the fully contracted position. That is the only position of the exercise where 100% of the muscular bulk can be activated. So here's the idea. Let's eliminate the positive. It doesn't contribute much to growth stimulation. Beyond that, it's even more negative, again, in that it makes a deep inroad into recovery ability. Start holding your weights in the contracted position, at least in those exercises where you have resistance in the contracted position, and then lower. Let's go back to the leg training.
Okay.
With my clients, I had been putting a heavier weight than normal on the leg extension machine, a weight considerably heavier than they can handle for 6 to 10 reps to failure. I help them into the straight leg contracted position, and they hold it there for as long as they can, literally, until they give me a signal that their static or holding ability is about to go out. And then I emphasize, now start to lower it very slowly under control. Then when they reach the bottom of the positive or the negative movement, I tell them to shake their hands out, take a deep breath, reset psychologically, and let's do one more. I just had a very clear example of the success of this last week. I had one client start up with me 3.5 months ago. He couldn't do the whole stack on the leg extension for even 1 rep. I forget what he started out with, but after 2 months, he was up to the whole stack for 14 reps. Then he hit a sticking point. He couldn't go beyond 14 reps for 3 workouts. This was when I started working with the idea of static contracted holds and lowerings. For 2 or 3 workouts in a row, all he did was hold a very heavy weight in the straight leg position and lowered it, doing it 2 times in that fashion as I described. The next workout, we went back to see if there was a carryover to the positive strength, and his leg extensions went up to 20 reps. That's a phenomenal improvement.
Right.
And I'm seeing this with many other people.
Would you propose that people do this for each exercise each time?
Well, you can't do it for every exercise because not every conventional weight exercise provides resistance in the contracted position.
Right, okay, but for those that they can do it.
I've been using it most successfully on the pull-downs. You can do it there because obviously once you get into the contracted position, there is significant resistance. You have to fight to hold it there. What I do is put a little bit heavier weight than they might use again for 6 to 10 to failure. I help them pull the bar down into the clavicles, which is the fully contracted position. They'll hold it, in this case, for about 6 to 8 seconds. Again, until the static strength starts to go, then they will lower it.
Terrific. Not only 1 set, but we're talking almost 1 or 2 reps then, also.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I had one kid say, well, how come your clients are only doing, in some cases, 1 rep or 2 reps? And I say, well, look, if you count the number of seconds that they're working, it's just as long, if not longer than 1 set. But we've eliminated the least productive part of the movement and are focusing on the more positive, or I shouldn't say positive, but the more productive part of the movement. Remember here, listener, as a bodybuilder, your primary concern is not to lift heavy weights. That's the purpose of a power lifter or Olympic lifter. As a bodybuilder, your primary consideration, your overriding concern should be to achieve high-intensity muscular contractions. On a deeper, more scientific, technical level, TC, the science of bodybuilding exercise revolves around the issue of muscular contractions. The only position where you can achieve a full contraction is in the fully contracted position. For instance, at the top of a curl. That's the fully contracted position. At the top position of a leg extension. For the tricep, it would be when the arm is fully straightened and the elbow locked.
Okay.
Now, the problem the listener is going to have is finding exercises in his gym that will enable him to do this. Now, most gyms do have leg extension machines and pull-down machines. Fortunately, over here at Gold's Gym in Venice, California, where I train people personally, we also have a full complement of Nautilus machines, all of which provide resistance in the contracted position. But don't worry about it too much. Do it where you can. Try it with the pull-downs, the leg extensions. See what happens. And if you'd like more information on this, I do provide phone consultation services. You can call me at 310-827-7661 for phone consultation services to get more information on this, or you can come out to Gold's Gym here and I'll put you through a few workouts.
Thanks for sharing that with us. That's great. That's great.
And I'm not exaggerating when I say that this is literally one of the most stunning discoveries in recent bodybuilding science.
That's great.
Just because we call this thing weightlifting, it's not cast in stone that you just lift weights. In fact, most bodybuilders, knowing nothing about this, they don't even do the positive or the lifting properly. They throw the weight, and then once they reach the contracted position, they immediately let it flop back down, not emphasizing either the contracted position or the negative. They're severely limiting themselves. Your muscles, remember, listener, have 3 levels of strength: the positive or the lifting, the static strength, which is your holding ability, and the negative. If you only work one level of your 3 levels of strength, do you see where it only stands to reason where you're not going to achieve full muscular development?
Mm-hmm.
Where is it cast in stone that you should only lift weights? It's a tradition. And again, if you want to take a truly scientific approach to this thing, you've got to reject tradition, or at least question it.
Okay, terrific. Okay.